What did you say, Grandma?
I said if men were able to have babies, there wouldn't be any rules banning abortions. They would have an abortion every single minute of every single day, every single year, every single month. Goddamn men.
Anything else you want to say?
I love everybody.
Hey ladies, welcome back to Somebody Come Listen to This podcast. This is going to be a really short video, and I want to say this to any men who may be watching this video. I don't think I have a lot of men follow me, but men, if y'all are not going to stand up and fight for women's rights and fight for your kids, you're about to lose a lot. You're about to lose everything that you've ever known. Like, the women are out here, I've already made videos on this. Women are out here going to jail for having a miscarriage. So imagine you as a man who is about to have a baby with your wife, or your daughter is about to have a baby with her husband. You are going to lose your baby and your wife at the same time if she has a miscarriage that had nothing to do with her, that her body rejected, probably because of your sperm. Your sperm was janky, old, not healthy. I've done a video on this, ladies. Go back and watch my videos. It's entitled More Reasons to Not Give Birth. Imagine your daughter about to have your grandbaby who's married, having a miscarriage, losing her baby that she was so happy to have. Her husband was so happy to have. She loses her baby. She goes to jail. So you lose your daughter and your granddaughter, and your son-in-law loses his wife. So this is what I'm saying. And then another issue that's going to arise is if your wife dies in labor because she can't get any help, and if that baby makes it somehow and they keep that baby alive for however many months and it survives and it has issues, you're going to be a single father of a child that has health problems, or you're just going to be a single father, period. You're going to need help. Your wife is no longer going to be there. So this is going to be a short video. I usually don't talk to men, but I think they don't even realize that by them being silent and not stepping up and fighting for women's rights, that is going to affect them in a tremendous way. It's going to affect them, their families, their wives in a tremendous way, ladies. So I suggest, ladies, do not be getting pregnant anymore. Let the birth rates just go to hell. If these men don't start standing up and fighting for your rights and fighting these men who are making these laws and getting them out of the government, I will probably get in trouble for this video. They'll probably be knocking up on my door trying to come find me because of this video. That's how bad it's getting, y'all. They don't want us saying stuff like this, even though it's true. Even though the world is on fire and we're trying to warn people, they don't want us talking about stuff like this. So please share this short video, and I will talk to you ladies later. Bye.
This is Nevaeh Crane, a Texas teen that was pregnant and died after trying to get care in 3 visits to Texas emergency rooms. 18-year-old Nevaeh began experiencing pregnancy complications at 6 months and went to the emergency room to seek treatment. She was told to leave because her fetus still had a heartbeat. She was denied treatment for over 20 hours and she died as a result of pregnancy complications. This is a perfect example of the deadly consequences of the harsh abortion laws in Texas. This story in Texas will be coming to the whole country if Trump is reelected. Kamala Harris will protect and defend a woman's right to choose. She will make sure that the only people involved in making these decisions are a woman and her doctor. If you care about the woman in your life, put them first when making your decisions at the ballots.
A woman in Texas was arrested and spent 5 months in jail for nothing more than having a miscarriage. She began experiencing symptoms of the miscarriage in a public bathroom, and eventually police broke into the restroom and arrested her. Just like the woman in Georgia who was arrested for her miscarriage, they charged this woman with abuse of a corpse. The judge set her bail at $100,000, which she couldn't pay, so she sat in jail for 5 months until prosecutors eventually dropped the charges and admitted that they didn't have sufficient evidence to prove that this was anything other than a miscarriage. The autopsy that was conducted long before her release date showed that this was a natural pregnancy loss. Oh, and it gets worse. While this woman was in jail, the state turned over the remains of her fetus to a religious crisis pregnancy center, which named it and then had a funeral and a burial for it, all without this woman's involvement or consent. At this point, I don't know how much more obvious it can be that these fetal personhood laws are actually a backdoor way to degrade the civil rights of women. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a natural miscarriage, and if the state can use that as justification to put you in jail for 5 months, we are in some serious trouble. And yes, I'm walking while we're talking about this today because this is bleak, and studies show that walking for 10-15 minutes, getting some sun in your eyes, is a powerful tool to protect your mental health and keep you resilient in this fight against regressive fascism. Oh yeah, I also want to mention, by the way, it's not a coincidence that the 2 women thus far who have been arrested for their miscarriages are both Black women. They're trying to intimidate the communities that are organizing against them into silence, and they're specifically picking those who are the most vulnerable. That's why it's up to those of us with privilege to pay attention to every move they make, call out their abuses of power, and fill up the legal defense funds that are on the front lines protecting these women.
Wasn't arrested because she had a miscarriage, it was because of the way she handled the baby's body. I want you to pay close attention to these 2 statements: concealing the death of another person and abandonment of a dead body. When you have a natural miscarriage, there is no person, there is no body. And I understand that miscarriage can be incredibly painful. My wife has had 2 of them. But a fetus is not a person until it is born. But if you didn't know, which I'm guessing you didn't, in Georgia, they passed a bill in 2019 assigning personhood to every stage of human development, all the way up or all the way down to embryos, endangering IVF. Because that little ball of cells is now considered a full-fledged person, which means if you have a miscarriage, you might be mishandling a dead body and mishandling a person by flushing it down the toilet, which is how many of them are handled when you are not as far along as this poor lady was. But all of this is coming to a head very quickly because in Georgia, they have another bill that is criminalizing abortion. And you'll notice it undermines IVF yet again. But this 24-year-old woman who was found bleeding and unconscious, once she was stabilized, they turned around and arrested her and put her in jail, which is where she still is right now. And no matter how much you want to do it, an embryo is not a person. A zygote is not a person. A fetus is not a person. If you cannot understand the dark implications of applying personhood to every stage of human development, then I am not sure what to do for you. What I do know is that you shouldn't have your life put in danger, experience a terrible loss, and then be thrown in jail because you handled it incorrectly. And frankly, if you can't understand that, get wrecked and get the hell off my page.
Gina McKnight was sentenced to 15 years in prison for homicide after she had a stillbirth that was allegedly caused by cocaine. It took 8 years. It took 8 years before she was released from prison after medical evidence proved the baby died from infection, not drug use. In 2003, Michelle Greenup went to the hospital with unexplained vaginal bleeding. She was charged with second-degree murder. She was incarcerated for nearly a year before her counsel obtained her medical records and proved she had a miscarriage. In 2010, Christine Taylor fell down a flight of stairs at her home. She was pregnant with her 3rd child and went to the hospital to make sure the fetus was not harmed. She was arrested for attempted feticide.
I live in a country where women are being arrested for having a miscarriage. A woman in Georgia was just arrested after having a miscarriage at 19 weeks pregnant and being found unconscious and bleeding and taken to the hospital. Even though there was an autopsy done after the fact and it was determined that the fetus was a miscarriage at 19 weeks and that the mother did not do anything to induce the miscarriage and the fetus was not born alive, she was charged with interfering with a body and concealment of a death. So now we're moving into a territory of criminalizing naturally occurring things that are happening to a woman's body that she has absolutely no control over. This woman had a miscarriage. She was found bleeding and unconscious and taken to a hospital, yet she was charged with a crime for having a miscarriage. The scariest part is this isn't the first instance of something like this happening. This is only the latest case of a woman being charged with a crime after having a miscarriage. I can't imagine the pain that this woman is going through after suffering from such a devastating thing happening to her body and losing her unborn child, and now to be charged criminally with something that she couldn't control is just absolutely sickening and disgusting, and really should terrify women across this country.
A woman, 22 years old in South Carolina, has been charged with homicide because she had a miscarriage. 22-year-old college student was charged with homicide by child abuse in South Carolina after suffering a miscarriage. Thankfully, a grand jury declined to pursue charges against the student last week, but this is another example of the criminalization nightmare that we can expect to see over and over again. Her story is very similar to the one in Ohio, Brittany Watts, who was charged with abuse of a corpse after flushing her miscarriage. Doctors tell women to go home and try to pass their fetuses when they're having a miscarriage, when they die. And they ask them to do that, and then if things don't progress the way that they're supposed to, they ask them to come back so that they can go do a DNC. This is getting delayed more and more and more. My mother could have died when she had to have a DNC back in the 70s, and they would not do that on her. They kept sending her back home, and she just kept bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. I remember this as a child, watching her. I'm going to keep reporting on these stories as much as I possibly can. A lot of people want to keep these private because they don't want their miscarriages to be politicized. They want the privacy. This has got to stop. Vote blue, down the ballot, everywhere.
She was only 18 years old, died 6 months pregnant because Texas does not allow abortions when it comes to the safety of the mother. Now her mother is without a daughter. 18 years old. She went to 2 different ERs and they refused to admit her. One of them turned her away saying she had strep throat, even though she told them she had severe abdominal pain and was bleeding. By the time she got to the 3rd ER, she was already experiencing sepsis. Her organs were failing. It would be another 2 hours before they would treat her because they had to make sure that her pregnancy was in fetal demise. By the time they were able to treat her with an abortion, she had died at the age of 18. How is this pro-life?
A woman in Texas dies because of a miscarriage because doctors couldn't intervene because of the abortion ban. Doctors say that if she would have been treated earlier, there would be a good chance that she'd still be alive. This woman needed a pill that would speed up her labor, and the doctors couldn't give it to her. They would risk jail time or $100,000 in fines. Her cervix was left open for 40 hours, and she developed sepsis. Miscarriages happen between 10 and 20% of pregnancies. Protecting people is not about putting blanket laws on entire communities, on an entire sex. Vote.
These are your wives and your sisters and your daughters. How do we, as the men in their lives, not want to protect them and make sure that they're okay? I don't understand that. It's wrong, and it's not complicated. Every man, good man, should feel a sense of responsibility to make sure any woman in their life put in the position that my wife was put in gets what they need to be okay.
So this video is for any of you lug nuts out there who are trying to say that Amber Thurman's death was not due to the abortion bans in Georgia. Now, what happened to Amber happened the month after that 6-week ban went into effect. So keep in mind, all these providers, obstetrical care providers, are trying to figure out just what they are allowed to do now that this ban is in place when Amber shows up. Now, Amber had what is called a septic abortion, which requires immediate intervention, resuscitative measures, fluids, antibiotics, pressors if needed if the patient's hypotensive, and evacuation of the uterus via DNC, because the DNC was put off, although records show that it was discussed twice Now, this is a hospital that was perfectly capable of doing a DNC. If you actually read what the Georgia laws have written, they say abortion means the act of using, prescribing, or administering any instrument, like in a DNC, substance, device, or other means with the purpose to terminate a pregnancy with knowledge that the termination will, with all reasonable likelihood, cause the death of an unborn child, provided, however, that any such act shall not be considered an abortion if the act is performed with the purpose of removing a dead unborn child caused by spontaneous abortion. Spontaneous abortion. Amber did not have a spontaneous abortion. So the docs probably didn't know what to do with that. And they were probably trying to figure it out. I wonder if legal and ethics were even involved so they could see what they could actually do, because that law is it's not very well written, as most of these laws are in states with abortion bans. And they're done that way for a reason, because they want docs to sit and think and cross their fingers and talk to other people and do whatever they can to avoid doing any kind of abortion procedure, because they don't want to get in trouble and lose their license and go to prison. Now, Georgia has a committee of 32 regular members from all different fields of medicine, OBGYNs, cardiologists, mental health experts, medical examiner, so on and so forth. And they met this summer of 2023 to review the deaths that occurred through the fall of 2022, which included Amber's. They noted the lack of policies and procedures in place to evacuate the uterus immediately, and recommended that all hospitals implement policies to treat a septic abortion on an ongoing basis. It was also discussed that that particular hospital, and probably a lot of them just like it in states with abortion bans, did not have any policies in place to guide doctors on how to interpret the state abortion ban. So since this happened, an internal task force of providers has created policies to educate staff on how to navigate the law. So, did the docs not do the right thing? They didn't do the right thing. Absolutely. They set on her, but they set on her for a reason. They set on her because a 6-week abortion ban just went into effect. Everybody's freaking out because they don't want to get in trouble and lose their license and livelihood and potentially go to prison for 10 years. So someone like Amber comes in, they're going to try to do temporizing measures until they figure it out to make sure nobody's going to get in trouble. Not just the providers, but anybody else involved in her care. So for anybody who thinks that this was not a direct result of the abortion ban, y'all are full of... People need to wake up. And all of these people, and I find the people that are the most vocal, especially on social media, are the ones that have no medical training whatsoever. None. But they have large platforms and their voice can get a lot further than mine can. They've never dealt with anybody in this situation, any patients. They never talked to a provider like myself, whose own job is on the line because of what I do, and I work in Texas. So maybe let the people who are actually in this talk about what's happening and the consequences of these abortion bans, because we are the ones on the front lines of it. How about that?
A mother having a miscarriage begged her doctors for help in a Texas hospital. They sat on the sidelines, wanting to act, but the state's abortion ban forced them to wait to intervene until the fetus had no heartbeat. By the time they did intervene, it was too late, and the mother joined her baby in death. ProPublica documented the stories of 2 women in Texas who died of sepsis after doctors, fearing the state law, delayed critical miscarriage care. Now, recent data confirms there's been a broader toll on maternal health. After Texas banned almost all abortions in 2021, life-threatening infections called sepsis in the second trimester of pregnancy increased by over 50% in the state. Why? Because doctors now had to sit on the sidelines in response to the Texas law SB 8, even if they knew that the fetus was not going to make it, and even if they knew that further delay of care only posed increased risk to the mother. Since the law went into effect, dozens and dozens more pregnant and postpartum women are dying each year compared to before the ban, and Texas is not alone. Tens of other states now enforce similar abortion bans, as it's increasingly politically in fashion for state politicians to legislate medical decisions for pregnant women. If not handled quickly, complications of miscarriage can dramatically increase risk, for example, from a life-threatening infection taking hold. In these cases, they know the fetus is not going to make it. They know what they have to do in terms of how to save the mom, and the critical roadblock is they're stuck waiting until the threshold where the state politicians have said they think it's okay for the doctors to provide the care they know they need to provide. It's been estimated that a nationwide abortion ban would increase maternal deaths by 24% each year overall. And such a ban has been explicitly suggested as a policy priority for the Project 2025 conservative platform that's been informing many of the Trump administration's decisions thus far. The evidence is really clear that when safe abortion care is outlawed, pregnant people's lives are put at risk, and the resulting harm is measurable. For families considering having children who have a choice of where to live, I guarantee you that they're looking at this type of a map of abortion restrictions in the country, and they're sitting there imagining what might happen to us if something goes wrong during pregnancy. They may be second guessing whether they really want to live in some of those orange areas of the country. No one wants to end up in a hospital and find out the doctors aren't going to be able to help you because the state politicians are trying their hand at medicine. And to be really clear about this, these are families who fully intended to carry the child to term, who may have already decided on a name for the child, who may have started decorating the nursery until something went wrong medically, and now they're facing miscarriage. That can happen to anyone at any time in pregnancy. Imagine if it happened to someone you love. What would be your reaction when they get to the hospital and they learn that the doctors are knowingly delaying life-saving care because of state laws?
People that have an abortion after 15 weeks, almost always, they wanted to keep the baby. But there's some kind of complication that came up that they have to have an abortion. So my wife, she was well past 15 weeks when she had to have an abortion. She was miscarrying and bleeding out, and all these things were happening.
Her life was in danger.
Her life was in danger. And for the government to say, oh, we need to evaluate this to make sure you're sufficiently dying before you can have an abortion. That's what they're saying in Texas and in Georgia and in all these states where they have Trump abortion bans. They're saying the government needs to evaluate whether you are sufficiently dying before you can have an abortion. Not your doctor, not you and your family, the government. No, stay out of it. Let these women, let them and their families and their doctors make these decisions. We don't need the government to be involved in it. And if the government's involved, that means the police and the district attorney are involved in medical decisions. That's crazy. It's crazy.
I agree.
And overturning Roe versus Wade, Trump wants to claim credit for it, but at the same time be like, I just put it with the states. Oh no, you put it with the states of Texas, states of Georgia, of Alabama, of,
Tennessee,
you put it with these states. And by the way, that's where most black women live, in the South.
Southern states.
In the South. So that means the majority of black women are in regimes that would rather possibly let them die before giving them the life-saving treatment that they need. When we went through all these fertility struggles and then had a miscarriage, it made it even more clear to me how personal everything that happens in that room with your OBGYN, everything that happens in that room is private. And it's so intensely personal and intensely physical. A woman feels every aspect of this thing.
John, when you have to console your wife because you know how bad she wanted this child. What are you saying? How do you, like Chris says, I'm sorry. There's not enough I'm sorry.
There's not enough. And the thing you got to realize is you're not going to solve the problem in that moment. And, I'm a person that likes to solve the problem. Like, I'm very like, I want to solve it. I want to fix it. And sometimes you got to realize you can't fix it. You're just going to have to live in it for a while and you're going to get through it, but you can't fix it all of a sudden. There's no magical words you can say to fix it, but you need to be there. You need to be supportive. And you need to work together to get through it.